Hey everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with our weekly update on social media. Thank you as always for joining us. A lot happening here in Washington, D.C. I've got good news and bad news. The bad news is we lost a trusted associate here at Judicial Watch. She no longer works here. The good news is she's in a very influential, excellent position now in the Trump Justice Department. Katie Blankenberg, who was an attorney here for a half a dozen years. Prior to that, she clerked when she was in law school at Judicial Watch, was hired to run the Office of Information Privacy in a political appointment at the Justice Department. The Office of Information Privacy is an agency that is supposed to manage the FOIA responses in the Justice Department and transparency policy generally within the federal government. And Katie's got obviously excellent experience, and we were all excited, however sad to lose her as a colleague, that she is going over to the Trump Justice Department. And I had a tweet announcing it. Let me bring it up. Oh, here it is. There's a nice picture of, there's Katie and me outside of the United States District Courthouse here in D.C. a few years ago. Congratulations to my former Judicial Watch employee, Katie Blankenberg, who just appointed Director of the Office of Information Policy at DOJ, where she helps lead the transparency reform efforts for the Trump administration. She spent years with us at Judicial Watch battling in the courts for transparency and accountability. We all wish her the best on the inside. She has quite the job to do. Well, it may be no surprise to you that the left is upset that a legal expert with a record of suing the government, both under Republican and Democrat administrations, and an expert beyond many others in terms of having the unique experience of working at Judicial Watch, is running a transparency entity in the Justice Department. Why wouldn't she be an excellent pick? So, of course, the left is angry. The Bloomberg ran a news story the other day that was widely derided for being essentially stupid, trying to controversialize Katie's appointment. Katie Blankenberg was announced as Director of the Office of Information Policy last week. Her arrival is generating concerns among open records advocates and former government FOIA lawyers that Blankenberg may favor document production to Trump-supporting causes, and that the office is turning away from stable, nonpartisan leadership. So stable, nonpartisan leadership is essentially a bureaucrat who outlasts presidents, who is essentially there forever and a day. And the Bloomberg highlights that prior to President Trump turning the position into a political appointment, there had only been, I think, 2 different OIP directors over 30 years, which is, at least from my perspective, an indictment of the office as opposed to something reassuring about so-called stability. And so Katie is in a position now to reform, as I note, transparency operations at the Justice Department and government-wide. Now, supposedly she has to recuse herself, according to the report, from Judicial Watch matters, which I'm sure is going to be overly conservative, because why should she have to recuse herself from all Judicial Watch matters? I'm not quite sure why that would be the case, but that's the way the so-called ethics system works in Washington, D.C. They come up with fake rules to manage fake issues in order to suppress individuals from doing what they know how to do best, which is to work on, in this case, transparency and disclosure. So here we have someone who, for the first time, comes from what is called the requester community, the people who request under FOIA. And what is the reaction of the lib media and the leftists that run it? Oh, we should be nervous about it. Well, I'm not nervous about it. Even if she has no ability to work on Judicial Watch cases, I know her efforts on behalf of transparency, given her record here, will be stellar, at least as best she can get it done within the Leviathan that is the Justice Department. So great news for the American people. What is Judicial Watch's loss is America's gain, with our colleague Katie Blankenberg now going and now being at the Justice Department as head of the Office of Information Policy. But she's got a lot of work to do. And of course, just because Katie's there doesn't mean we're going to stop suing the Justice Department or other agencies for records and demanding answers, and nor does it mean the courts are going to stop demanding answers. We had an interesting case, or a disturbing case, that we're pursuing with the FBI and Justice Department. Dan Bongino and Kash Patel highlighted the secret room, the burn bag room with documents about all sorts of matters, including, it looks like, the targeting of Trump. And Judicial Watch said, well, that's interesting. Tell us what's in that room. Give us the documents. So, per usual, the FBI and Justice Department stonewalled, so we sued in federal court. And as part of the disclosures to us in the lawsuit, they said there could be as many as 1.9 million records. And now the number is upwards of over 2 million records. And they really haven't given us too much in the way of details since then. So the court is concerned, and so are we, that were these records are they repeats? Are they just being kept away from people and they're not accessible anywhere else? Why weren't they searched in response to prior Judicial Watch FOIA requests or congressional subpoenas and things like that, right? And so the court said, you know, that's a fair concern. And she ordered the Justice Department and the FBI to provide answers. They said that given the fact that it's 1.9 million records, it's going to take 158 years to process the records. So what they pretend they only can do is only look at 500 pages of records a month. And if you do the math, it's essentially, at least for the portion they're saying they're going to process, 158 years. And I don't know if the court's going to be ultimately comfortable with that, but you know, this is one of the other frustrations we face. No matter who's in office, it's just the slow walking of records. And in this case, it seems to me there's urgency in getting these records out, because it looks to be, based on Dan Bongino's comments about them, records that kind of go to the fundamentals of how our republic is being run and whether it's under threat from the deep state. This is what Dan Bongino disclosed in May of last year. There was a room in the FBI headquarters, and we found stuff. A lot of stuff hidden from us, at least did not mention to us, and then found stuff in there. A lot is from the Comey era. We are working right now to declassify, and just so you know, because I get the public, I totally understand people say, well, do it now. The process is not all the information is ours to declassify. Some of it is other intelligence agencies. We literally can't do it once that gets done. And you read some of the stuff we found. That, by the way, was not processed through the normal procedures, digitizing and putting the FBI records. We found it in bags, hiding under Jim Comey's FBI. You're going to be stunned. And later he said, I don't know where he said it. I think it was after he left the FBI, because Dan was deputy director. He said he went and looked at at least a key document that was only 100 pages, and he said he was, shocked to his core. So why isn't there urgency in getting these records out by the Justice Department and the FBI? Certainly, if they can get millions of Epstein records out, I understand Congress passed a law to force the immediate disclosure, but FOIA has a 20-day rule. Isn't this at least as important as the Epstein records? I would argue, given the way Kash and Patel, the FBI director, and Dan Bongino have talked about them, they are as important, if not more so, because they, it looks like, reflect on and document the plot, the coup cabal, the sedition against our republic, the lawfare to try to destroy President Trump. So get the records out. And so they're still not now they also say, well, some of the records are two investigations that are older, and they're being vague as to what they are. And the court said, well, why don't you tell Judicial, if we don't want to argue about 1.9 million records, why don't you tell Judicial Watch what these two investigations are about so they can figure out whether or not they want to make it a priority or even, just say, okay, well, we'll get to those later. Just give us this other group of records now. And we can't even get that basic info. And this isn't just the FBI, Justice Department. It happens all over the agencies. They just don't want to give us basic information about some of the documents they have so we can speed along the responses and the disclosures to the American people as required under federal law. But the court wanted more answers, and she issued an order shortly after a telephone status conference, so it was essentially a court hearing over the phone. Said, Judicial Watch had reasonable questions, and this is the order she issued, demanding answers. So this is what happens. You get the lawyers get the emails from the court, and they send what is known as minute orders. I jokingly call them the minute orders. So upon consideration of the joint status report, which is a document both parties sign or file to provide the court a status as to where the case is. And as discussed at today's status conference, it is ordered the parties shall file another joint status report on or before September 4th, in addition to updating the court on the parties' progress in narrowing the issues. The joint status report shall include the government's responses to the following. So in essence, she's saying, I have questions and I want answers. And the answers she wants are whether the legacy and or recent records at issue in this FOIA request have previously been considered or reviewed in response to other FOIA requests. See, this is like the Hillary Clinton email scandal all over again, right? We asked for Clinton emails in the Benghazi case, and they didn't look at them because she stole them all. So they were never reviewed. And so this is the second part, whether the legacy, and legacy records, I mean, are the older files that we're trying to figure out what they're about, and or more recent records at issue in this FOIA request are contained in any other system of records or indices. So why is that important? So my understanding of federal records law is that records are supposed to be managed, right? Let's say there's a legal definition of what a federal record is, and it basically has to be put into a system. And essentially, it's got to be subject to being searched in response to FOIAs and subpoenas and things like that. So you just can't take a federal record and bury it somewhere. You can't take a federal record and hide it in a secret room or put it in burn bags to disguise their importance. And so she wants to know, were these records just like copies and they're somewhere else in the system? Or were there potentially, in my view, I'm kind of reading into what she's asking, because the implication is, if they weren't records managed, there are potential legal violations as it relates to federal law. So this is kind of a big deal to have the Justice Department report in the not too distant future, a week or two, whether or not these records that Dan Bongino and Kash Patel disclosed as being essentially hidden by the deep state that they uncovered in a secret room, whether or not they were subject to FOIA searches or whether they were managed as the law requires in terms of keeping track what the government's up to, right? So if the government doesn't keep track of it, if the documents just go sit in a pile somewhere no matter what, that's not the way the law is with respect to protecting the business of the people. So they're documented so that we know where we're spending our money and whether there's any misconduct or inappropriate behavior going on. So all federal agencies are supposed to follow that. And then she asked, the government shall also determine whether it can provide additional information regarding the nature of the two investigations it represents are reflected in the legacy files. So she's trying to move the ball forward. So that's what the frustration is from the federal courts, is the ball isn't getting moved forward sufficiently by these deep state actors, even under the Trump administration. Now, there have been some remarkable transparency moves by the Trump administration. There's no doubt about it. But when it comes to the basic FOIA work, it ain't ready for prime time. That's for sure. In terms of, I think, what the president would expect be happening, because it is not happening in terms of the timely disclosure of information, especially about the worst government corruption scandal in American history, which is the targeting of President Trump. They're sitting on potentially 2 million records that in part at least reflect on it, and they're telling us it would take 158 years to give to us. And that's not a serious response. And Kash Patel and the new Attorney General, congratulations, Mr. Todd Blanche, should get on it and get these records out to the American people. As I said in our press release announcing the court ruling today, American citizens should be outraged. The FBI has told a federal judge it could take 158 years to process the records in its secret burn bag room. Now the court is demanding answers about whether these records were previously searched, whether they are stored in record systems as federal law requires, and what two mysterious investigations are represented in the so-called legacy files. It is urgent the American people receive all the details on how the FBI and the Justice Department were used as political weapons against Donald Trump and other Americans. The agency should stop stonewalling and get these records out. Now, of course, Judicial Watch has an incomparable record of success in getting records out of the Justice Department and the FBI about the lawfare targeting Trump, going back a decade almost. So, they know what we want, and they say it's stunning, the records that reflect on this abuse of Trump by the Obama, Biden, Clinton gang. And yet, what are they doing? Telling a court it's going to take them 158 years. I mean, that's given the rule of law a brush off as best as I can tell. So I'll give you an update in 2 weeks when we get the information. Maybe they'll give us some more information, and I'll let you know, because, heck, you're paying for it as taxpayers. So Judicial Watch is officially a crime victim. How is that? Well, one of Fauci's top deputies, David Morans, pled guilty essentially to a conspiracy to obstruct and mess with FOIA records and hide them from the American people and Judicial Watch. As I noted in a social media posting, let me bring it up, FOIA criminal, after admitting he knew how to make FOIA emails disappear. Remember, he's the guy who said the FOIA lady at HHS or NIAID or NIH was very nice and told him how to make FOIA emails disappear. Fauci crony David Morans just pled guilty to conspiring to defraud the U.S. and commit other federal crimes, including destruction and concealment of records and bribery. He faces up to 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. And underneath this tweet, there's a tweet from a few years ago. We were complaining about the stonewalling of Judicial Watch for records about COVID in China. And this was the category of information that we were being stonewalled by as a result, in part, of Morin's criminal activity, admitted criminal activity. And in the indictment, they list the Judicial Watch FOIA lawsuit, a key FOIA lawsuit about this issue, as being one of the FOIA cases that were obstructed by his criminal activity. So what does that mean? It means that Judicial Watch is a crime victim. Yes, there are criminal consequences potentially to refusing to follow FOIA or messing with it. Now, of course, Hillary got a free pass on all of that. David Morin, thankfully, under the Trump administration, didn't. And I wonder what else has been hidden. Now, new information is being released virtually every week by the Senate as HHS and NIH, et cetera, give records they should have given the Judicial Watch 4 years ago directly to the Senate, like Fauci's text messages, emails about COVID vaccines and how dangerous they were. And more recently, there was an email, for instance, Fauci was told by a top official at the FDA, if not the top official at the FDA, we got to track these vaccine adverse events more closely. What they hid from the American people is downright criminal. And so, you know, we're happy that there's some transparency directly with Congress, but we don't know if that's all the records they have. And the only way to, or the best way, I shouldn't say the only way, to understand what the scope of records are at issue and to make sure they're disclosed is through litigation. I mean, FOIA is the best way to do that. So we've got these lawsuits for these very records, and they're pretending they don't exist. And so some records get sent to the Senate, and we're supposed to think that's all of them. Maybe it's not all of them. But there's no way of checking that unless you go through the court system, or unless the Senate and Congress are much more aggressive. But Judicial Watch just keeps on keeping on when it comes to transparency on Fauci and company. We just sued, for example, the FBI for Fauci's cell phone records. It looks like it was leaked and reported. In fact, Johnson just put out some material, Senator Johnson from Wisconsin, that he obtained from Fauci's cell phone, his iPhone. And we had asked for these records 2 years ago, or at least last year. And we didn't get them. So where did he get these records? Did HHS have them? They gave them diary records that Fauci had that hadn't previously been produced to Judicial Watch in its numerous FOIAs. Indeed, one of the text messages that were uncovered on the iPhone, you know, raised questions about the vaccine safety related to pregnant women. Now, of course, the usual suspects are defending the vaccine as being perfectly harmless, more or less, to women or pregnant women. And there was some concern, at least initially, about Fauci, there might be issues, none of which was disclosed to the American people at the time. So we got news that the iPhone records of Fauci were sent to Senate, but what about FOIA? Why didn't they respond to Judicial Watch's FOIA request? Are there other records? So we sued the Justice Department, the FBI, for the contents of Fauci's government-issued cell phones, supposedly that have been recovered by the FBI, which is curious. Were these records given to Senator Johnson, FBI records, or HHS records? I'm curious to know. And it was a simple request. All contents obtained from the government-issued cell phones of Fauci. Kash Patel told Joe Rogan about it on TV.
I mean, we just had a great breakthrough this week on Fauci. So Senator Rand Paul, Senator Kennedy, and I hate naming names because I always forget people, are doing a great job with us on COVID origins. And We've got multiple investigations open on that. But they had always been looking for Fauci's original phone, or not original, but phones and devices he used while he was Fauci back in Trump 1 during COVID. And nobody had found it till 2 days ago.
Really?
Yeah. Now, look, your audience and everybody listening to it shouldn't jump to the conclusion everything's in there. We'll look at it. We'll pull it. We'll rip it, as we say. And maybe it's deleted. Maybe it's not. But at least we found it. And at least now we can tell the American people we've been looking, because it is of public importance to figure out, did that guy lie? Did he intentionally mislead the world and cause countless deaths? We owe those answers to the American people. And the best evidence ever is always the people's evidence who created it. And so now we're going to go and exploit those hard drives. But I think a victory for the American people that we broke with Congress is that we did find it. We're not done. We're still looking. And we're on the case.
We asked for the phone records after Kash Patel disclosed them to Joe Rogan. So what is the response back from the FBI? Oh, no, they're law enforcement sensitive. You can't have them. So we just sued for them. So the law enforcement sensitive records that we couldn't have were given to Senator Johnson of Wisconsin, but they can't be released directly to the American people under FOIA. How does that work? So this is the game that we have to suffer through in terms of getting access to the records. Now, I don't know about you, but I consider what Fauci did and what the public health deep state establishment did to the American people and the world to be one of the most significant abuses, frauds, arguably crimes in the modern era. And I don't mean just here in America, I mean world history. They destroyed lives, they destroyed reputations, they destroyed businesses, they destroyed economies, they hurt children, they killed God knows how many people through their blunderbuss, dishonest public health pronouncements and promotions, denied access to families, to their loved ones as they were supposedly had to be quarantined. I mean, you remember it all. We're still not recovered from COVID, the abuses of power under the COVID era. And at the center of it was this one government official, Anthony Fauci. And we're still fighting in court for basic records about what he was up to several years later. And it's really inexcusable. And so it's another case of where you get some transparency, but not enough under law. And I'm sorry, on these big issues, you can't have enough transparency. We just can't have this kind of limited, modified hangout of records. It's an emergency. I mean, we could have another type of COVID situation, and we'll be back at square one. And one way to prevent us getting back to where we were again, in terms of the suppression of the world, or oppression, is to figure out the full truth about how they handled it last time around. And as I've noted before, Judicial Watch has been second to none in uncovering pretty much everything of importance that we know about gain of function, the funding of gain of function in Wuhan, gain of function here in the United States, the vaccine lies and dishonesty, the censorship. You were censored. I guarantee you were censored. I know you were censored. You know why? Because if you were following Trump or numerous other individuals like me or you name it, our material was censored as, quote, misinformation because we didn't buy into Fauci's analysis. We disagree with a government official, and so Fauci got all of his friends, and there was almost this joint operation to censor anyone who said anything different about COVID. And we want the full truth, and that's why we're in court again on behalf of the American people. So, one of the other wild abuses of power during the Biden administration, and really kind of an effort to turn the country into a one-party state by jailing the political leadership, both informal and formal, of the Republican Party, was January 6th. They used the January 6th incident as a way to try to jail Trump, destroy Republican Party organizations and activists. It's still going on. It's still going on. I mean, my colleague, Christine Bobb, she was indicted in Arizona for doing nothing. And it's years later, and only recently did her indictment get dismissed. And so Judicial Watch continues to investigate the January 6 abuses because, again, it was an effort to not only bring down President Trump and interfere in the election using January 6 as a pretext, but it was an effort to turn the country into a one-party state, rig the election, and make it effectively impossible for any citizen to challenge any election outcome ever again. And so Judicial Watch, again, has been a leader in uncovering what went on January 6th. And one of the issues that has been recently raised is phone records that were captured by the goons at the Biden Justice Department and Jack Smith of various senators and congressmen, and as part of a targeting of hundreds of American leaders in conservative and Republican politics. And I know Judicial Watch was targeted. I know I was targeted. The FBI came to my house, served me a subpoena. And one of the worst abusers was the January 6th committee set up by Nancy Pelosi, not to find out the truth about January 6th, but to use the tools of the House of Representatives, powerful tools for subpoenas and investigations, basically to dig for dirt to try to throw people in jail. I mean, there was no real honest, good faith investigation. And one of the things that came up was they got 30 million lines of telephone data. And two of the individuals involved on the committee, Denver Riggleman, who's a former member of Congress, and Adam Kinzinger, they talked to the FBI about their offer to turn over 30 million lines of phone records to the Justice Department. So it's not clear what happened, so we sued. We asked for the records about what went on here. According to an FBI 302 report, which is a document recording an interview with an FBI witness or target, depending on the circumstance, Kinzinger told the FBI that he proactively offered the January 6th committee's massive database of 30 million lines of telephone toll records to the FBI. The summary states Kinzinger stated the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol collected and linked a substantial amount of telephone data and noted the FBI may already possess such data. While former Congressman Denver Riggleman, he worked as a staffer, I think, on the committee, even as a former congressman, worked with the Select Committee. Riggleman, had a contact and was able to obtain toll information, including for White House route or switchboard numbers via congressional subpoena. Kinzinger noted that he Kinzinger did not conduct the analysis himself, but that Riggleman had identified certain telephonic connections between numbers and identified as being associated with the White House and certain individuals. Kinzinger indicated that Riggleman may never have received direction on what to do with the toll data, which included, again, this is from the FBI, approximately 30 million lines of data. Kinzinger believed it was in an electronic format, but did not know if it was the original material or returns. Again, they targeted at least 8 Republican senators to steal their phone records. Yeah, I know there was a subpoena, or they went through the legal process, but it was not good faith. So as far as I'm concerned, they were stealing crap they knew they shouldn't have been able to get access to. And in fact, they did know they shouldn't be able to get access to, because internally, the records show they were concerned about taking Senate records because of the separation of powers, the speech or debate clause, etc. They didn't care, they just did it secretly anyway. The FBI must stop concealing the truth. 30 million lines of American phone records weaponized by a partisan committee and federal investigators against President Trump and his supporters represents one of the most brazen abuses of power in modern history. The American people deserve every record, no more stonewalling. We want the records, or at least what happened to them. Maybe if they're records that are identified by that are personal to people, we may not be able to gain access to them, but there's all sorts of data related to the potential transfer we should be able to gain access to. And of course, this isn't Judicial Watch's first rodeo when it comes to January 6th, as I've noted. We obtained just a few weeks ago all the body cam footage from the DC police. Took 5 years. So January 6th is the worst day in American history, yet you had 1,000 hours or so of body cam footage from the DC police that hadn't been shown to the public. Judicial Watch sued and got the records. Our lawsuit was a success. They're now up online. You can look at them. I'll post a link below. And we also sued successfully on behalf of Ashley Babbitt, her estate, her family. And the Trump administration settled for nearly $5 million with the family over her needless death. That's a pretty big January 6th issue. The only official homicide victim that day. Judicial Watch went to court, got key records about Ashley's situation and the non-investigation afterwards of her killing. So this wrongful death lawsuit was settled for nearly $5 million. We found out the CIA was on there helping federal law enforcement and DC police on January 6th. What was the CIA doing at the U.S. Capitol? Judicial Watch found that out. And now we want to know about this transfer potentially of 30 million lines of records, or what happened to the records. Where are they? Does the FBI have them? The DOJ? Does this Congress? Maybe we can find out through FOIA. And it would be nice if, again, the Justice Department and or the FBI took this FOIA law more seriously, because they're not pursuing it the way, or they're not enforcing it and following it the way they should, especially given President Trump's personal commitment to transparency. So, in summary, Judicial Watch is the nation's leader on transparency. One of our former team members is now leading the government's transparency efforts for the Trump administration. In the meantime, our legal team, our investigators have thousands of FOIAs and FOIA lawsuits about what the government's up to. I sometimes joke about this. I say we're investigating everything. We really are. If there's an issue you care about, we are investigating it. And if there are issues you think we should care about because maybe it's a little bit it may be not known because it's more of a local or state issue, we may have missed it, let us know. We're easily reachable on the internet, etc. So without our commitment to the rule of law, our commitment to transparency and enforcing the rule of law with respect to FOIA, I don't know where the country would be if it weren't for Judicial Watch. And I don't know where the country would be if it weren't for Judicial Watch supporters. So for those of you who support our work, thank you. You can see the tremendous results that we get. And secondly, for those of you who don't support our work yet, I think I've given you more than enough reason to join our cause and join our movement and make a donation by going to judicialwatch.org, click on that donate button. And the rest of you who still want to figure out what Judicial Watch is about, go and look at all the documents. Read our books, great books by me for Judicial Watch, disclosing pretty much everything we've been talking about. I mean, if you want a record of the lawfare and the deep state sedition over the years, nothing beats Judicial Watch's books. I think you go to judicialwatchbook.com. I think that site still works. Get our most recent book, Rights and Freedoms in Peril, and our prior books as well. And as importantly, like this video, share this video, comment on this video, boost the algo so that your fellow patriots can see this important information and follow us in the future. And with that, I'll see you here next time on the Judicial Watch Weekly Update. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.